Hi, I'm Lucien Pierce, an attorney at PPM Attorneys. I've recently been observing quite a bit of activity in the profiling space. You might ask what profiling is. Well, the South African Police Services recently put out a request for proposals for specialist monitoring software, and that monitoring software is going to look at social media and essentially extract information that will alert the South African Police Services to potential crimes before they occur. Similarly, the Gauteng Premier in Johannesburg is based in the Gauteng province, announced a lot of new smart technology that's going to be implemented to monitor and prevent crime within the province. I've also seen a lot of activity in the private sector insofar as forensics are concerned. And in this regard, what's happening is private sector entities are using artificial intelligence, social media, and other technologies to try to predict where criminal offenses are going to occur. Now, you might ask, well, that's fine, Lucien, that reduces the prospects of crime occurring and it benefits everyone. But of course, one of the issues we need to consider is the privacy aspect. And under South African law, our Protection of Personal Information Act deals with profiling and related matters. And what it says is where you're taking information from different sources, for example, from information you might have gathered from a person, and then looking at perhaps information that you've obtained from a credit bureau, and then perhaps lastly looking at information that you collect from public sources like social media. In those instances and in certain situations, you're going to need to get what is called prior authorization from the information regulator in South Africa. And this is because processing information from different sources can result in databases that contain very sensitive information. Now, if we look at the South African Police Service, and if we look at the Gauteng Premier, and if we look at the private sector, there's a strong chance that they're going to have to get prior authorization for those activities. But somebody who's involved in privacy law might say, aha, hang on, Lucien. There are actually provisions in the Protection of Personal Information Act, that's South Africa's privacy legislation, that exempt certain law enforcement agencies from having to comply. And I'd say, yes, of course. What it does say is that agencies like the South African Police Service, certain security agencies, and others tasked with investigating crime are exempt. But there is a proviso, an important proviso in the Protection of Personal Information Act. And what that says is that these agencies, these law enforcement agencies, are exempt provided that there is some other piece of legislation that regulates how they process that personal information and how they protect that personal information, which is great. Now, having taken a look at the South African Police Services Act and also looked at the regulations under the South African Police Services Act, it was a cursory look, I must admit, but there doesn't seem to be any provision in either the law itself or its subordinate regulations that deals with privacy. So my view is that this new technology that the SAPS is going to implement to monitor social media might just be facing a small problem from a privacy perspective. And it may well be that the South African Police Service need to revisit their legislation or obtain prior authorization from the information regulator before they start using this very important piece of software. Similarly, the Gauteng Premier, before he starts implementing drones and other artificial intelligence to proactively prevent crime, might need to also get prior authorization. And lastly, private sector organizations in their audit and forensics departments certainly are going to have to get prior authorization from the information regulator before they start engaging in these proactive crime prevention activities. So this is going to be quite an interesting space. There have been many developments, and we've seen certain cases decided abroad, and I'm quite sure there's going to be a lot of activity in the privacy space in South Africa in the near future regarding prior authorization and profiling. Watch this space. It's going to be interesting. Thank you.